Good evening, students. This is my second video recording, and in this particular video, I will be discussing the ending of the novel, or more particularly, the final 11 chapters of the novel. So, before I begin, or before you continue on with this video, I would suggest and advise you to go back and finish reading the text if you haven't already done so, and particularly the ending of the novel, without which you will not be able to grasp whatever I am trying to analyze in this video. Um, so let's begin. First, we have to realize why is it important for us to understand the ending. It is important for us to understand the ending very briefly, because this is what I will be discussing in details. Very briefly, it is because the ending of the novel contradicts the novel which has the part of the novel which has led to this ending. That is, before the final 11 chapters, it is as if the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a separate work altogether. Now, this complete detachment from the rest of the novel and the final 11 chapters of the novel is what has put various scholars and critics in a fix and led to the novel being a further controversial one, as it is. We know that it has undergone several uh, bannings and concords, and several schools and institutions have not allowed the book to be read by children, regards the way it deals with racial issues and the various characters that are present in it, the words that Mark Twain uses pervasively in his novel. All these had already put the novel in a controversial stance. Now, the ending of the novel adds to this controversy, because it changes the course of the entire novel that has happened for so long. Now, what happens in the final chapters of the novel? I will just summarize a bit for you. Well, we see the introduction of Tom Sawyer into the novel. Now, we know the introduction of Tom Sawyer, we are going to complicate things, because he does not belong to the similar thinking capabilities as we have seen Huck and Jim belong to. He is a persona from a different novel, and he brings in with himself his own characteristic features, his own wild, adventurous heart, and well, what should I say, a careless attitude towards the people who are around him. Tom engages himself in fantasies, in illusions, in delusions particularly, and he does not uh, look for adventures that might happen really, or might turn up to be something that is really happening in front of you. Whereas Huck, who has never fantasized about his reality, does actually go through a series of adventures, something that you might find yourself between in the course of your life, or anybody can. But Tom Sawyer's adventures have always been fantastical. He has always been the kind of a person, well, also he has also been the kind of a person whom his contemporaries, or whom the boys with which he roams, his friends, they look up to him. Even Huck looks up to him the most, because you have to understand that Tom is the only person who derives his fantastical knowledge, as they are, but from books. He is the only literary source of information that these group of boys have with themselves. None of the others have do read any books, do read any fiction that might bring a tint of imagination into their life, but it is Tom. So when Tom is introduced into a novel like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, we are rest assured that there will be certain challenges, there will be certain changes or reversals, because he does not belong to the similar magnitude of characteristic features as Huck and Jim do. So what happens in the final 18 chapters, final 11 chapters, is that Tom Sawyer is introduced, and we find that there are a group of people, and of course Jim and Huck, they land on the Phelps farm, and we find that there are few people who are looking for Jim with guns, and they might just shoot him. Tom gets hurt. Tom gets a bullet on his leg, and he gets shot in this escapade. And Huck goes to look for a doctor for him. Now they are hiding, the two of them, that is Jim and Tom, they are hiding on the raft. They are hiding away from these people who are looking for Jim to hunt him down, correctly speaking. But Jim exposes himself to the world at the risk of his life because Tom needed help. Now this is how he shows his humanitarian values. This is how he shows his care for a fellow human being. But we must also remember that this incident also provokes a dialogue from Huck, which to him is not contradictory to his character, but it is contradictory to us if we think of the racial issues that the novel deals with. When Jim exposes himself to the world in order for Tom to be taken care of, Huck says that he always knew Jim was white inside. Now, this particular statement should take us back to our previous analysis, as I had already stated that Huck does not develop a moral conscience that is similar to the people who have tried to civilize him, that are similar to the people who are trying to hunt down Jim, that are similar to the people who are in acquiescence with the fugitive state laws. Huck develops an adjacent moral conscience, or as I had again already said, that Huck develops something that is develops a mentality that is completely free from any sort of a conscience. And that is what we have already termed a river consciousness, as a part or as opposite to the shore consciousness. If we divide the features and the characteristics, the conversations, the dialogues of the people who live on the shore, and the same of the people, that is Huck and Jim, who live on the river or the raft particularly, we will find a stark contradiction. Huck does not accept any of the morals, any of the normative conventions, any of the societal restrictions, constraints that the civilizing properties of the shore, Miss Watson and Aunt Sally, a Pap Finn, or a Judge Thatcher would try to impose on him. So he grows a separate conscience of his own that is free from the moralities, that are free from the conventions of everything that we go through, everything that we as even independent people go through. So Huck is in line when he says that Jim is white inside. Huck is in line with his own developed consciousness. So what happens next is that we find that Jim is chained up. People have chained Jim by his hands and feet, and they are deciding upon whether or not to free him, whether or not to murder him, I'm sorry, whether or not to kill him. So, well, of course, he is saved. Tom does come to his rescue and explain to the rest of the people how Jim has saved him, how Jim has some certain heroic qualities about it. But a nigger cannot be a hero, so therefore Jim can never be called a hero. Neither can Huck, for the matter, because he belongs to that gray area of a villain, of a person without any consciousness, whom we really cannot call a hero. And then again, he is a hero if we take the novel to be a journey towards the freedom of Jim. Now, this is the problem, that in the ending we do not know if Jim is free at all, because a problem has already occurred now. A conflict has already occurred, because there is it is not necessary for Jim to be freed by anybody, because Miss Watson has already freed Jim in a letter that she has written, which Tom hides with himself. Now this is again characteristic of Tom Sawyer, because for him the only purpose that he means to serve is the purpose of an adventure. So if going and trying to free Jim is the greatest promising adventure that Tom could ever have in his life, and he did not want to let go of that opportunity, so he hides the contents of his letter and goes through the journey of freeing Jim, quote unquote freeing Jim, anyway, even though there is no necessity for it. And we And quite problematically, we do not find Huck intervening in this situation. We find that Huck again takes his very own characteristic style, and that is taking no stand at all. We have already seen that he never violently erupts, or he never tries to contradict or fight his father when he's being abusive, when he's being violent. He never contradicts an Aunt Sally or Miss Watson when they are trying to civilize or educate him in the Bible. He never contradicts Judge Thatcher when he tries to civilize him again. What he does is that he escapes, he evades the situation, because he understands that it is not his place to take a stand. He does not want the limelight. He does not want to possess all the qualities, all the features, the characteristics that make us, the readers or the scholars, identify any character as a hero. He does not want to be in the spotlight. He wants to drift away as the river drifts away continuously and perpetually. And he also wants to become one with what the river Mississippi symbolizes throughout in the novel, and that is absolute freedom, which we had already discussed in our previous class, that absolute freedom does not even come with a conscience, that we are always under certain restrictions, even if we are so called if even if we are living a so called independent life. So Huck does that again. Huck pulls an escape again, and he goes away from that situation, wherein we do not know if Jim is freed at all or not. And Huck says that he wants to light out for the territory, that he has had enough of it. He has had enough of the civilizing qualities of the people living on the shore. He has had enough of the mindless feuds that goes on that goes on among people, among religious people, the same religion with which he was also attempted to be instilled by Miss Watson. He does not understand the logic of the shore civilization, and therefore he wants an escape from it. So the ending of the novel is the final escape that he makes. The ending of the novel is also the greatest evasion that the author makes, and this is what we will be trying to discuss in this video. Now again, before I begin with it, there are three particular and sorry that before we begin with this again with the analysis, we must there are three people about whom or regarding whose writings I will be primarily discussing in this lecture. The essays of three people, these essays I will be sharing with you separately so that you can go through them on your own. However, the analysis part, or what they are trying to say and trying to build all of their opinions into a concrete understanding, that is what I will be doing for you. So these are the three people, and these are the people about whose works or whose essays I will be primarily analyzing in this video. Now these three people, they will be of different views. The first two, that is Lionel Trilling and then Thomas Stearns Eliot, they will be their views will be in agreement with each other, but Leo Marx completely attacks the criticisms and the conclusions that the former two achieve. Now this ending is particularly important or problematic because of two reasons. Again, these are the more elaborate reasons, of course. The first reason is, of course, the introduction of Tom. Now, this is a great substitution that occurs in the final chapters of the novel. So far, we have had Huck and Jim. So far, we have had the building or the build up, or the what should I say, the development of a peculiar bond of friendship between Jim and Huck. Huck Huck's father, the position of Huck's father, which Pat Finn could never accurately take, could never justifiably fill the shoes of, is replaced by Jim. Pap abuses him. Jim makes him understand. He teaches him his own ways, the ways of the spirituals. Pap hits him. Jim takes care of him, cooks food for him, looks after him, watches out for him when he is asleep. Pap is vulgar, violent, and a drunk. Jim is Huck's friend. Now, there lies their connection, the bond that is constantly developing as they move onwards and onwards down the Mississippi and towards the prospective freedom of Jim. So, it is only very right of us, the readers, or scholars, or critics, to expect that it will be eventually or ultimately it will be Huck who arranges or who helps Jim really acquire the freedom. It will be Huck who will be uniting Jim with his daughter, with his wife, with his own family. And here, Mark Twain introduces the character of Tom. Huck is suddenly replaced or substituted by Tom. Now, why so? Before I answer the why, let us just discuss the second point. The second point is the life of Mark Twain or Samuel Clemens himself. As we have already discussed a few parts of it, you are when you are writing about the ills of the society while you are inhabiting the space of that same society, there are a lot of evasions that you need to make. Samuel Clemens, who was a part of the genteel society, who was a part of the white slave owning southerner society, was essentially writing something that is against them. Clemens also wanted to be a radical. In his heart, he wanted to challenge the existing societal norms of slavery. He never really liked that. We have talked about that. I have shared with you a biography or interviews of Clemens, and I'm sure that you did go through it a little bit. So, Clemens was not very much in acceptance or very much in agreement with the norms of the society at that point of time, of the reconstruction of the reconstructed America, or before that. Now, in this situation wherein he is a part of a genteel society and also is against the societal norms, this is the midway that he had to take. And this is also the reason why he chooses a character like Huckleberry Finn to be a protagonist of his novel. Huckleberry Finn is also like Clemens. He also belongs to that white slave owning southerner society. He also grows up to be against the conventional norms of the society that imposes upon him hypocritical attitudes, hypocritical learnings, and hypocritical ways of life which he does not want to escape. Which he does really want to escape. So, this escape or evasion is the only way in which you can hold your stand, in which Clemens can hold his stand, of writing perhaps another book in which he humorously attacks the genteel society in which he lives. Because you see, he had fame and he was becoming popular and um, attracted to it, and he wanted to experience the perks of living in a genteel society, the perks of being a part of a genteel society. But at the same time, in his heart, there was a conflict. There was a conflict of not being able to accept a society that sells people or that owns people like a property, like cattle. Huck is also like that. Huck does not want to be a part of the society. But since he is, nobody is attacking him as they are attacking Jim, even though both are runaways. So the great evasion is also an evasion of the author himself. The author has to take a midway stand. He cannot outright criticize the society and bring to us an ending with which we are in agreement. And what will that be? That will be an elaborate celebrated or this freedom of Jim summarily described in the ending parts of the novel, with Huck taking the trophy, Huck becoming the person in the spotlight. Now, Clemens did not want that because it is completely in disagreement with Huck's character as it has developed so far. Huck does not want the spotlight. And Clemens also does not want the spotlight when it comes to being a radical living in and among the very society which you are criticizing in your work. And that is why it was necessary for Twain to introduce Tom into the novel, or into the final chapters of the novel, because it is only Tom who could take this entire journey and turn it over into a humorous reconstruction, wherein he will pull uh, tricks and jokes on the characters or the people who live within the novel, within the text, and it can all be just boiled down to a good-hearted humor and nothing serious, because this is what Tom does. This is perfectly characteristic of Tom Sawyer, about whom we have already read in another novel and also in the beginning of this particular novel. Huck cannot be the person who provides freedom for Jim, because then it becomes serious, then it becomes true, and then it becomes something of an example to be followed, which Clemens could not have if he wanted to secure the position that he had in his society. Because if Jim is already free, which he is already freed by Miss Watson, then whatever happens in the final chapters of the novel is actually fruitless. You are not disregarding any conventions of the society. It is just a joke, it is just a elaborate prank that Tom pulls, because Jim is already freed. So there is nothing quote unquote serious happening at the end of the novel. You are not challenging the normatives of the society. You are not in any sort of a danger. And that is why it has often been called the great evasion of Twain rather than that of Huck. That is the final chapters of the novel. Now, what Lionel Trilling would like to, what like would like us to remember, or what you would also want to remember, is the genre of this novel. What is the genre of this novel? What is the style or technique in which the novel is written? It falls under the genre of a picaresque novel. Now, what happens in a picaresque novel? In a picaresque novel, we have the lead character, a picaro or the rogue, who is a vagabond, who does not belong to any structured formations of societal conventions, who does not follow the normatives of a conventional normatives that are imposed upon the individuals living in a society, the constraints, the restrictions that make you fall under a homogeneous structure inside of which each and every one of us is stuck in a very sad and circular way. The Picaro does not fall in this structure. Picaro does not fall in this vicious circle of life and death. For the Picaro or for the rogue, there is only one thing, and the one thing that is the most important, and it is the journey. Like Becky Sharp in Vanity Fair, who skips and jumps towns, fairs to fairs, looks for lovers and partners and friends, and eventually and is provided with numerous opportunities to quote unquote settle down. She does not. She always returns to the road. She always returns to the journey, because that is how the character of a Picaro develops. Because that is how a rogue develops his conscience. That is free from the restrictions and constraints, or any kind of adulterations of the society. It is an individual and private, a very personal conscience, very personal intellect, which by which the Picaro or the rogue learns to decide, learns to be decisive. It is not in accordance to the society, but in accordance to himself or herself. Now, Huck is also a Picaro. For Huckleberry, it is not desirable, neither something that is attractive, that is to be in the spotlight, that is to be called a hero. He does not want any of the attention which all of the other people or the other characters of the novel are showering upon Tom. Now, Tom is made for that. Tom is a particular character who wants that and achieves that, as we have already seen in the previous the novel that preceded it, that is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. If you have not read, then a brief summary reading of it would suffice. You will find that that is what Tom strives for: trickery and games and fun, frolic and adventures and fantasies and illusions. What does Huck strive for? Huck strives for the open night sky. He strives for the Mississippi. He strives for a filial bond, for the bond of friendship that he develops by hard work. Hard work, I say hard work because we have witnessed, there are extracts from the novel that we have already read together in class, which shows how Huck constantly changes. He adapts. He listens to what a Miss Watson has to say. He listens to what a Judge Thatcher has to say, listens to them, but does whatever he thinks is right, not in accordance to what he listened from them, not in accordance to what they taught him, not in accordance to what he saw even. Whereas Tom reads books, understands them as reality, and tries to reenact them in his life, does not matter what kind of problem or what kind of hindrance it may cause for any other person in the novel or for any other character in the novel. Now, this limelight or this spotlight which Tom is enjoying very, very much to the fullest optimum capabilities, Huck escapes from. Huck does not want it to happen. Now, this is how the genre of the novel is justified. This is how a picaresque novel must always end, that the picaro or the rogue must always return to the journey or always to the road, because that is how his or her how the picaro's conscience is developed, and it needs to be developed constantly, as it is with lives that exist outside of the boundaries of the text. That is in reality, that is how it is. We are constantly in development, we are constantly growing. There is no full stop to our growth. It is not just physical or temporal growth that happens to us, but our mind, our experiences constantly build up upon each other, one upon each other. And for a person whose developmental journey begins on the road must also end with the road. Now this circularity, this circular character of the novel, or the plot of the novel, or the genre of the novel, is to some critics like Lionel Trilling what renders it the aesthetic quality. A work of art becomes complete only when it begins in its end or ends with its beginning. And so you can, I hope you can relate it with T.S. Eliot, why he will also be defending the ending of the novel, because he was one with this philosophy. He does write in his Hollow Men that in my end is my beginning, in my beginning my end. And these critics belong to that school of criticism, or that school of scholarship that rendered the aesthetics of art to be the most important thing that art can do. And in this case, in this way, they are completely correct, that this is there is no other way in which the novel could have ended. If you put one after the other all the points that I mentioned, you will see that there is no alternative way in which Clemens could have ended the novel. It had to be in a quiescent with the development of his characters. It had to be a quiescent with the characters that get involved in the great escape from the shore, or the journey on the Mississippi. And in this way, at least in this way, the ending is quite justified. Now, for Thomas Stearns Eliot, it is more so of the story of the river, the journey, or the Mississippi that becomes the protagonist or the real hero of the novel, because you see that he reminds us of the profession that Clemens belonged to, that Clemens was a steamboat navigator in his life. And according to Eliot, if you are spending your life, if you're spending your life as a professional life and also making a livelihood out of it, and that is also the life that you want to instill in your art, then that life for Clemens the river becomes an immovable or permanent part. It occupies a permanent part in your art as well. And in this way Clemens justifies his novel too. It is the river that is the protagonist. It is the river that controls the voyage of Huck and Jim. It is the river, it is like the river that Huck aspires to become. And the river occupies the central position in the novel. The story is not about Jim or Huck. The story is not about the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but essentially about the boy and the river. And Eliot is again justified in this when he calls that the river is the true hero of the novel. And if that is the case, then what happens is that in the novel we come to experience the river. The river becomes the experience. And if we go back and revise or brush up upon our knowledge of the Kantian ideal, the Enlightenment philosophy that was propagated before and that also led on to the colonization, and then of course the slavery, the entire institution of slavery which was based on this philosophy, or any imposing phenomenon carried out by the dominant race was based on this philosophy at that point of time. Enlightenment, what did enlightenment show us? It taught us, or it taught the people that experience is how you gather your knowledge, that experience of phenomenon or discoverable things or activities in this world, things or activities or people or things or activities which can be discovered, which requires you to sit and study about it, and you can come to a valid conclusion after that said study. Only that is an experience. That is how you gather or your knowledge. So if in this case, if the river is the experience, or if we are to experience the river, or river forms the center of experience in the novel for the characters and for the readers as well, then what does the river teach you? What do you discover at the end of the river? The river that meets with Missouri, that crosses Ohio, Tennessee, and then disappears in the Delta. That whatever happens beside, on the shore of the river, on the banks of the river, does not actually affect the river in reality. The river flows. As Tennyson's poem had taught us, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. It is the river that forms the central crux of imagination and experience for Twain and Huck, respectively. So the river must go on, and if Huck's source of knowledge or information or his philosophy or whatever way in which he develops his moral conscience, if his only source is the river, then he must also go on. The river that does not stop for anybody on the shore, for anybody who asks it to stop. The river cannot be tamed. It will break through eventually, and then it will disappear among its deltas. That is what Huck wants. Huck enjoys anonymity. You must remember that Huck did not run after Jim, or Huck did not look for this adventure to come into his life. He chanced upon Jim. He chanced upon Jim on an island in which he wanted to live a solitary life, in which he wanted to sleep under the naked sky and count the stars and see the sunshine and the moon rise, and wanted to smoke pipe and just float on the raft on the river, which Jim makes for him. Now, all this experience, coupled with the existence of the river, the omnipresent river, the self-sufficient river, the phenomenon that does not require the intervention of human beings at any point of its course whatsoever, that is a life that Huck aspires to have. And this is how the river controls the voyage of Huck, or the voyage or the course or the plot of the novel altogether. Huck does not fall into any amorous relationships. There was a prospect of it, if you remember. He does not get attracted to it because, like the river, Huck cannot be partial to any one person. That, like the river, Huck cannot have a single attraction towards which he can go. There is no magnet that attracts him. It will decide its own course on its will, not before that. He cannot, the river does not sit and wait and think that there is a boulder. Now I need to think if I can go through it or over it and be or beyond it. The river does all of this. It goes through, it goes beside, it goes over, above, under, beyond, and so does Huck. And this is why it is important for him again to come back to the river, because there is no other way in which he can gather his knowledge. Um, and in this busy world, which which the loafer or the vagabond or Huck represents, in a busy world, it is in this world he lives hand to mouth. He arranges for his food as it happens. If he cannot arrange it, he will go hungry. There is no place in which he is dissatisfied, because this world cannot harm him. He has isolated or insulated himself from this world. He does not belong to the Sunday school. He does not belong to the church. He does not belong to the feud of the shepherd's sons and the Gangafords. It is only to the river in which he belongs, and as such, it is more than apt for Clemens or Twain to bring into the novel a character which could rightly fill the shoes of Huck, which we imagine to be is the correct way for him to be, and that is Tom. And therefore, again, the ending, in this perspective, the ending of the novel is quite justified. Now, E.M. Forster was of the opinion that sometimes it so often happens that while an artist is creating a work of art, or particularly a novel, because his theories revolved around the novel as a genre of art, uh, a novel, sometimes it is the plot that has to take the central position. Sometimes the author, the novelist, has to sacrifice the integrity, the dignity of the characters, or just because he gets bored of it, just because has to round it off, he has to end the novel. The novel has to have an end, you see, that's quite practical. And it is the plot that derives a central character. The plot has to be circular, the plot has to end, and the plot has to end in a comprehensive manner, not just like that. The stream of consciousness and everything else was about to come much later than about 40 years after Huckleberry Finn is written. So those kind of theories do not exist at that point of time. Clemens was not read in those theories, even in the advent of those theories. They come after him. So it cannot end like that. A structuralist analysis of a plot does not end anywhere you want it to end. It has to have a structure. And the plot becomes more important than the continuation, than the consistency of the characters. And it was herein lied the problem, because his plot was centered around the journey of the Mississippi. Now, what is the meaning of this journey? According to Leo Marx, this is the question with which all criticism of Huckleberry Finn must begin. What is the meaning of this journey? He says that there is much that we owe to the enchantment, or the enchanting image of the journey, the enchanting image of the raft's unhurried drift, its solemn and solitary continual journey towards the end that it does not have, because it always begins again. The leisure, the absence of restraint, the absence of any constraint, the beauty of the river. These are the things that delight us. The best portions of the novel surround the journey of the raft on the great Mississippi, and as Huck will also say, that it's lovely to live on the raft. And the multitudinous life, the great vagaries of life that we witness are in and around the great valley through Huck's eyes. It has a fascination of its own. It does have a fascination of its own, because it is a boy who does not belong to any of the blocks that you decide for him within the society. We do not understand, or a high school student will not understand, why would an orphan, or why would a person, why would a boy whose father is like Papvin is, does not have a mother, would deny education, would deny people like Judge Thatcher in his life, who really want to take care of him. Why so? Huck does not belong to even those liberal men or women with conscience who are also present in the novel. He belongs to a separate ideal altogether. He is, as I just said, he is like the river. He mirrors the river. But alas, the life of a human being cannot be exactly like the river. So he mirrors the river as long as it is the absolute freedom which it symbolizes. The bloodshed, witnessing of death, feud in churches, guns, bullets. These are the things you have to witness if you are born as a human being. But it is quite enthralling to read as Huck sees the world around him. Then, of course, there is humor. There is humor, the way in which Twain writes it. It frees us from the bitterness of the actual conflicting racial relationships, racial issues that existed at that point of time. It gives a sort of a lens in front of our eyes and the book when we pick it up in front of us, and it renders it a kind of calmness, that you are not to take all of these too seriously, so that you can forget it as soon as you finish reading it. And that is the most important thing, as I had said, one of the most important thing, as I had said, because it was important for Mark Twain to remain steadfast in his societal position, the society that was offering him with so many privileges and accolades, of course. Now, there is one particular scene that that changes the way that we look at Huck and Jim. A very very important scene that we had discussed in our classes, and that is when um, Huck comes back to Jackson's Island hurriedly and says that, "Get up, Jim. We have to run. There is no time. They are after us." And the moment that he says us, Huck unnecessarily, because it is not necessary for him, he includes himself within the structure that Jim occupies, an enslaved, runaway nigger. This is unpremeditated. He did not think that his journey will be going like this. He identifies with Jim's flight, he identifies with his torment, and this also becomes an unforgettable American experience. It is the culmination of the journey which the journey which detracts, which explains the urgency, which gives weight to the dignity, and this is all necessary. But however, it is the journey that becomes the most important. Huck saying that he is together with Jim in his flight, with Jim in his flight. Now, this flight, this journey from one end to the other, this becomes the first and foremost important topic or important thing to be realized in the novel. Huck is no longer important. Jim is no longer important. It is the journey of them together that becomes the most important. Now, Huck realizes this himself, because at the very end, what happens? At the very end, we learn that Jim was already free. So all of this journey is actually the journey was actually futile, because it was not necessary at all. It was not necessary for them to be taken up at all. But this is not just a simple device that Mark Twain employs, that the Miss Watson's letter. There is some complication to it. It is more complicated than it seems.
Now, this journey becomes or seems to be futile now at the end of the novel because we learn that Jim is already free. Jim has been free for a couple of months now that we come to know from Miss Watson's letter, which Tom does hide the contents of to himself in order to have an adventure regarding the freedom of Jim while he tries to free Jim. Now, what is the purpose of this? Why does Twain or Clemens make a plot like this in which the principal characters have to take a journey which becomes essentially futile at the end of the journey because of one person whose revelation comes to us later on, and that is of Miss Watson's. It is important, it is one of the important points, that is one of the important devices that Twain uses. Now, how have we known Miss Watson so far? Watson has been an imposing, a constructive teacher of Huck, who tries to teach Huck the civilizing ways of the society, of the religion, of Christianity. Uh, However, she does not abide by that. It is hypocritical, as we know from the conversations or from the monologues that Huck has gives in the beginning, in the few beginning chapters of the novel regarding Miss Watson and Aunt Sally. Miss Watson is also a woman who could not resist the $800 that a slave buyer offers her for Jim. Miss Watson does not hesitate to break her word to Jim, as she had promised him that she would not sell him away. Now, what is the motive of then giving Miss Watson this right, the right, the absolute right to free Jim at the end? It is perhaps what Mark Twain wanted to do. Uh, that is to give to us the readers or the people or the society a ray of hope that there exists a possibility of change, that a person like Miss Watson, who did not hesitate to break her word to a slave, since she could not resist the attraction of an $800 from a slave buyer or a slave trader, she is the person who eventually changes her mind and decides to free Jim. She is the person who at last regrets of ever thinking of selling off Jim to somewhere else or away from his own family. Uh, Now, this is one motive that is perhaps served by the ending of the novel. There is also another one that the ending, what it serves is to provide us with a humorous with a humorous burlesque, or with a probable uh, with the probability of thinking that we are not to take it all too seriously, that it is after all humor that you must adhere to, that is after all a comedy, that it is after all the adventures of a Picaro, and you must not take some very high standing moral education or moral stances from it. However, by employing the humor in which he does employ it in the final chapters of the novel, slapstick comedy, uh, which shenanigans, or which the tricks and simple tricks and trickeries that people pull off towards the end, at the end of the novel, while Tom tries an elaborate plan in order to escape, in order to help Jim escape. All these renders a kind of superficiality to the character developments which so far has occurred in the novel before these final chapters begin. The way that Huck has developed. Huck has always developed morally, he is constantly in development. He rejects the views that are provided to him by the people who adhere to the norms of the society, and develops his own moral conscience, develops his own consciousness, free from the adulteries and free from the grimy slave owning southern America. Um, this the ending is not even not consistent with the way that he has developed so far in the novel. He finds he finds cruel whatever is very normal to the people, to the white people of the South, and this does not go hand in hand the way he acquiesces, or the way he is in agreement with the mistreatment of Jim. Jim also does not uh, well, or what should I say, rebel in any way whatsoever. Jim's character development is also hindered in the final chapters of the novel. This person who was constantly a careful, somebody who would pay attention to those around him, to Tom and Huck, that stance is also taken away in the final end of the chapter. That is, of course, how the author makes him to him. He has also undergone a similar transformation as Huck, who was obviously morally developing throughout the novel. Now we see a complete end to his development, or we do not find a product of the experience or any result of the experience that he has gathered on his journey on the Mississippi. And Jim's yearning for freedom is also reduced to an object of comedy. It is no longer the a serious event that required that dangerous or perilous journey over the Mississippi by the two unarmed and man and boy, being chased after constantly in search of the people who were in search of the fugitive slave. Now, here is the point where Tom is also introduced. Now, this is important because Tom's introduction renders a kind of justification to the downfall of the character who have only so far developed. And as Jim is again reduced to the common stereotypical Negro about whom we have discussed in our last lecture, the typical black face, a Negro who is only uh, to be made a comedy of or joked about, we see Tom coming back in his original form with his original aura as we had found him already in the novel that was actually dedicated to him. We see that Huckleberry once again comes under the sway of Tom's influence, that once again he looks up to Tom for the adventures that he proposes, for the way that he attracts and gains and enjoys the spotlight, for the way he uses his fantasies and imagination in order to turn life into a real adventure, which Huck actually does not want. Therefore, Tom's introduction at the end of the novel also serves this purpose, so that the humor, the stereotype, and the unwanting rogue, their characters or their places can be justified, their structure can be sealed and finalized by the one person who can pull off this entire farce at the end of it, and that is Tom. So, whereas on one hand, we have a T.S. Eliot who says that it is the river that becomes the consciousness of the novel, the river that is the most important character of the novel that pushes its plot. We have a Leo Marx who says that the river provides the journey. Yes, true, but it is the motive of freedom or the promise of freedom at the end of the journey that is the most important. For it is on the for the river is the way that provides you to the freedom. For Leo Marx, Eliot takes the notion of freedom too lightly. The possibility of freedom is too great to be falling in love with just the journey. Can we really imagine a Jim in the real world to be romanticizing the river when his family is the only thing that is the first and the foremost thing he misses, and that too not in a normal and ordinary circumstance, but in a circumstance in a world where slavery is accepted, where slavery is common and normal and legal. Now, freedom comes comes as the biggest motivator or moving force in the novel, and it is the river that provides the way, and there in that manner the river obviously becomes one of the most important characters in the novel, because it is in the river where Huck and Jim develop their friendship. It is on Jackson's Island that they meet together. It is the river that takes them from one place to another, without the promise of freedom, without the final destination, the novel or the adventures of Huckleberry Finn would just be a series of adventures without any objective whatsoever. What the river provides us with essentially is a point of conflict, as it is on the river on the Mississippi, on the raft, that a white free boy and an enslaved nigger come in such close affinity with each other that they become friends, that they become inseparable from each other, that one fights for the other and is ready to die for the other. And on the other hand, there is the happenings on the shore, feuds and killings and fire and gunfires and bloodshots and slavery and cruelty and animal killing and well, all of this as in conflict to the raft consciousness that the two of them develop. Now this is a critique of the society, of the common standards of the society. This is a critique of what was so commonly engaged by the people of South America at that point of time, of this enslaved South America at that point of time. And therefore the river provides us with this essential conflict or challenge in a novel that for the larger part is a critique of the contemporary society. And this tension, this challenge, this conflict had to be released at the novel's ending, but the release at the same time also had to control the central theme, and the that is how the central theme being that at the end of it all, at the end of the journey of the Mississippi River, all you can do is live in compliance with what happens at the shore. And so as George Santayana, it was while critiquing the American humorists, he says that Mark Twain only half escaped the genteel society, the genteel tradition. He says that there he contradicts the traditions of the genteel society, the contradicts the consciousness of the shore, but does not abandon it altogether because he has no probable substitute to replace it with. So if you take away the hypocritical, adulterated, the criminalistic, ostracizing, marginalizing, all of these adjectives, if you put together, attributed to the uh, institutionalized slavery, which the American society at that point of time had embraced so fully and so consciously. Uh, what do you if you take away all of take away the society, what do you replace it with? What substitute do you have? What probable better outcome, what alternative can you provide it with? And since Clemens could not come up with a substitute of it, he had to comply with it, he had to be in compliance with it, however tragic or however contradictory it might be to the rest of the novel.
Because after all, we have to realize that this is a realistic novel, and Mark Twain belonged to this school of realist authors, and it could not have ended in any other way but in silent or in humorous, tongue-in-cheek manner compliance with the hypocritical traditions of the then American society. Now, if we just move back a little, we will find that the journey that Jim and Huck take, that is over the Mississippi and to Cairo, as they move more and the more they move towards Cairo, we have to realize geographically and in truth, they are moving into more and more restricted slave owning society. The closer they move to Cairo, that is obviously the apparent uh, place where Jim will gain his freedom. This was already questioned by some critics, that why Cairo, as because all the places that the Mississippi passes through, or all the places that the raft passes through, they are the gravest and the most darkest of slave owning societies that were present at that point of time. And so as they move towards the freedom, it is only natural that the farther they come away from it, because the more and more they move towards it, as the plot had been structured like that, in actuality they come farther and farther away from it. And if we just recall what I just said about Santayana's comment that that Clemens did not have any solid structure to replace the hypocritical, gentle Christian American society of that point of time, what could he have substituted it with? The only answer that we have is the raft, because that is the only sustaining symbol, the only driving symbol that that pulls or pushes Jim towards freedom and Huck towards achieving a complete freedom of choice or complete moral stability. But that raft in itself is a very feeble construction. It is breakable as it does break. And so, any structure, this also implies quite symbolically and metaphorically that any structure that replaces an existing structure takes the attributes of that which it has just destroyed. Because it is in a society, in the real life, this is what happens. You get engulfed unwittingly, even if you do not want, you get engulfed within the structures of the society, within the normatives of the society. And it is only through tiny rebellions, through little bits and pieces of revolutions that you bring here and there, which actually do not have any impact on the larger world for the matter, but it has a personal impact on you, as it has for Jim. It has a personal impact on you as you read before the final 11 chapters of the novel. And that is why this is again, this is another problem that is posed by the ending, that there could have been no alternative ending precisely because of because of the time in which Clemens was writing. There, even though you can criticize it, this is also one of the best probable endings that he could really come up with. But what if we look at the ending from Huck's perspective? What does it do to him? How does it stand right by him, or how does it stand wrong by him if that is the case? You see, if this is a quest for freedom, we have been saying, but how about if we just reverse our attitude towards this outlook and we see that it is not a quest for freedom but a quest away from the society? That is Huck's primary objective, or his most important goal, the only goal that he has throughout the novel, is to escape the societal constraints. He constantly says that I have had enough of that. I have seen enough of this. They have tried to civilize me. I have already been there before, etc., etc. In so many instances he pulls these famous one liners. He's always comfortable in going to hell. But one thing that we must remember is that Huck does not arrive at these conclusions after philosophizing about that, as we have already discussed about this in class, that he does not make his decisions based on an educated learning or observation, or by having an inherent philosophy that has grown within him by vast degree of knowledge or reading or witnessing or gaining of experiences. No, he chooses by ease. The way of the abolitionists, that is helping a nigger to escape. He does not do it to acquire a high humanitarian hand in the society, neither to gain the limelight, which Tom does, which we have already discussed, but it is primarily and fundamentally to escape the society which restricts him, which constrains him, and which imposes upon him in order to become a stable and moving part of itself, a part of that society from which he wants to escape. That escape is his primary goal. And as such, at the end, he does not pull off a heroic deed, is quite justified. And what Tom does at the end of the novel, that is make a big foolery out of the entire journey for freedom which so far has sustained itself on the raft over the Mississippi. What Tom does, making a burlesque out of it, an elaborate joke out of it, in order to become the hero, that is, we have also been doing the same. By we mean the readers who are reading the book in the 20th century, or even in the 20th, in the 21st century, in the 20th century, just post civil war. Any person who reads the book for the first time post civil war actually takes the book as a comedy, as a humoristic retelling of perhaps failed quest for freedom of a nigger, of a fugitive slave. What is it to us? Are we in serious acquiescence with it? No, we take it humorously. We admire the humor of Mark Twain. It is children's literature after all. It is children's literature. In your syllabus also it is, well, in certain schools and high schools it is, or even in, well, some other syllabuses, it is posed under, or it is categorized under children's literature. And therefore it robs itself of any definition of a serious statement, serious explanation of what was happening in in enslaved south, in the enslaved south, in the pre-deconstruction area. So what Tom does at the end of the novel is basically reflect our own sentiment, that is, we are in no place to understand the sentiments that are actually involved, that were actually involved within the flesh and bones of those who were slaved, and within the flesh and bones of those who were enslaving them. And as such, the only thing that the book rebels against, again, I would repeat, the only thing, the one and the only thing that Mark Twain, Clemens, Huckleberry, and the book, the work of art, the novel entirely rebels against, or stands in rebellion against, is conscience. Since if you cannot belong to any one set of conscience whatsoever, you cannot be on a raft on the river forever in your life, you cannot be forever floating, you need to come to a stasis at one point of time. And on the other hand, that stasis is also unacceptable by you, because it is perpetrated by people who justify animal, making animals out of fellow human beings. So you cannot be in agreement, be in complete compliance with that kind of conscience at all. So this is the only way out, and this is the only rebellion that Huckleberry Finn, or the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, stands for and justifies till the very end. As for the ending of the novel itself, whether it is justified or not, it is for you to decide, or it is also for you to keep in indecision forever, because this is how you enjoy a book, students. You do not, you refuse to come to any conclusion, not because you're incapable of it, but as Coleridge had said, that there has to be a willing suspension of disbelief. Because can you really imagine a black slave, Jim, who is, can you really imagine Jim as a slave from the character of Mark Twain's novel, and Paul D, a slave from Toni Morrison's novel? If you go back and read the summary of these two novels, you will find that there is a difference, as there is a difference between heaven and hell. Race, as Huckleberry Finn, as Mark Twain wrote about, and race as a Toni Morrison would write about, it seems as if they are coming from different spectrums of the universe. They do not converge, they do not overlap at any point of time, that they do not converge or overlap at any point of space. There is nothing common between the points of views, the perspectives, the narration, the people, the pain, the empathy that both of these novels represent. And yet, both of these novels deal with racial issues. So that is how you actually enjoy a piece of art. You willingly suspend yourself from coming to a conclusion, not because you cannot, not because you are unable, but because you deliberately refrain from it, because once you come at a conclusion, you stop the interpretations. These are the, all of the facts that I provided in these videos are compiled and gathered from various critiques, from various critical essays, from various analogies, from various metaphors, and all of these for one single point, for one single work of art, because that is what a good book should induce within you. It should induce within you curiosity to learn more. Not only that, but learn in more and more different ways as it is possible for you. As I said earlier, I will be sharing with you the individual essays also. You can go through it for, well, for more quotations if you want to include, but I do not think that more quotations will be necessary if you have taken down or written down what has been written, presented to you on the screen. However, for some authentic reading, I would send them to you. And this is all I have to say about the ending of the novel. There is nothing more important or more novel ideas that I can add to it. If of course you are free to research on your own, go through JSTOR and individual articles or journal articles if you wish to. There is no stopping you from doing that. Please come up to me with suggestions, queries, problems, or any hindrance that you might face. I am available any point of time in the day, of course. Please do not hesitate. And I hope that you find this video comprehending enough. This will be followed by, most probably tomorrow, by my last and concluding video lesson that will be dealing with the sexuality in the novel, patriarchy and femininity, and how Mark Twain deals with the gender struggle in the novel. How is gender represented? How is the conflict of gender represented? Even though that should not that does not require an elaborate attention. However, it is important because we have seen stereotypes in the novel, and if stereotypes exist, then of course there will be gender stereotypes, because you cannot evade that kind of stereotype uh, in any work of art. And so I will be dedicating some time to discussing the sexuality that the novel deals with. And with that, we will have ended this novel. um, well, I will be waiting for your questions and anything that you have to say. Thank you very much.